Welcome to Unveiling the Truth,
where we unveil the truth about the Catholic Church teachings one fact at a time.
I'm Nefer.
And I'm Nellie, and today we're unveiling the truth about the evil of contraception.
This is the third part in our 4-part series of what is destroying the family, and so without further ado, let's go unveil the truth.
Alright, so before we get started, we're going to start off with a prayer. Like everything that is good and holy starts off with a prayer.
Yes, ma'am.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Dear God, we thank you once again for bringing us here together safely, for making our lives carefree and just like spiritual and living in your word and in your love. And we thank you for this equipment and having a place to come film and spread your word and spread your gospel. And please help us to open up hearts and minds and let people understand the evil in contraception so that they may change their mind and stop hurting your heart and also stop hurting Mary's heart, because we know she is the mother of all children of the earth, and we know that this hurts her more than anything. So in her name, we ask for her forgiveness and for your forgiveness, and we will pray, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so before we dive deeper into it, we're just going to explain. The Catholic Church is one of the only churches or former religions that is officially opposed to contraception. That's why contraception is a bit of a touchy subject, even within the Christian community. And the basic umbrella topic, which we will be touching on, is as to why the Catholic Church is against contraception. It's mainly on the basis of morality. So just being open to life, and how the use of contraception, it's immoral because it proposes or it accepts a culture of promiscuity. It encourages that, it enables that. And on top of that, it is one of the many ways that people can be closed to life.
Right.
And so obviously when we talk about life, children, the family unit, that all kind of ties in together with what we talked about in our previous couple of episodes. So yeah.
Right. And I think something you mentioned before we started filming was how this is such a debated topic, because some people who are even Christians and who are religious and who are pro-life, they also think that contraception is okay.
Right.
Because they think that they're just preventing a pregnancy, when in actuality, a lot of the birth control methods, like the pill, is actually abortifacients.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, for example, the pill, what it does is it lines the uterus and it tricks the brain into believing that it's pregnant, so it miscarries the baby. So that's one of the reasons that abortion is wrong, or contraception is wrong, is because, like you said, it just kind of closes off that life and that openness to life.
Yeah.
Even in marriage. So, like you said, we're one of the only churches left that teach that contraception is wrong. Like, it is one of the intrinsic evils of the church, actually, which means under no circumstance or any situation is it acceptable. It is always evil and always wrong.
Right.
And it wasn't until 1930 that the Anglican Church broke away from it, and then after then all the other churches broke away from it. Right. And it's actually really disheartening to hear that, because Catholics contracept just as much as anybody else. In fact, 90% of Catholic women contracept.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. So we have some and contraception comes from evil roots,
Yeah, it's rooted in evil. Right, so let me read very quickly from Evangelium Vitae, which is the encyclical we've been looking at in the past couple of episodes of this series, written by John Paul II. He wrote, "It is frequently asserted that contraception, if made safe and available to all, is the most effective remedy against abortion. The Catholic Church is then accused of actually promoting abortion, because she obstinately continues to teach the moral unlawfulness of contraception. When looked at carefully, this objection is clearly unfounded. It may be that many people use contraception with a view to excluding the subsequent temptation of abortion.
Right.
But the negative values inherent in the contraceptive mentality, which is very different from responsible parenthood, lived in respect for the full truth of the conjugal act, are such that they, in fact, strengthen this temptation when an unwanted life is conceived. Indeed, the pro-abortion culture is especially strong precisely where the Church's teaching on contraception is rejected. Certainly, from the moral point of view, contraception and abortion are specifically different evils. The former contradicts the full truth of the sexual act as a proper expression of conjugal love, while the latter destroys the life of a human being. The former is opposed to the virtue of chastity in marriage, the latter is opposed to the virtue of justice, and directly violates the divine commandment, "You shall not kill." Wow. But despite their differences of nature and moral gravity, contraception and abortion are often closely connected as fruits of the same tree. It is true that in many cases, contraception and even abortion are practiced under the pressure of real-life difficulties, which nonetheless can never exonerate from striving to observe God's law fully. Still, in very many other instances, such practices are rooted in a hedonistic, which basically means sensually self-indulgent, mentality, unwilling to accept responsibility in matters of sexuality, and they imply a self-centered concept of freedom, which regards procreation as an obstacle to personal fulfillment. The life which could result from a sexual encounter thus becomes an enemy to be avoided at all costs, and abortion becomes the only possible decisive response to failed contraception.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's basically saying that, so first of all, when you use contraception, especially in a marriage, you close off that openness to life. In fact, when you get married, that's one of the vows you make, is that you will be open to life.
Right.
So just the fact that you use contraception is like, it causes a mental and physical boundary between your partner. Mm-hmm. Because when you get married, you are supposed to give yourself wholly to that person, because you become one flesh, as God says. Right. You become one flesh. So when you use contraceptive, you're basically saying, I don't love you enough to give myself wholly to you and to become one with you, and I don't love you enough to have children come forth from you.
Right.
So that causes that boundary. So instead of being one flesh, instead of becoming one flesh, you're two fleshes that are just like meshed together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and another thing that I thought was really interesting that JP2 mentioned was that people, like, and especially people on the right, which kind of triggers me a bit, that there's like conservatives who will be like, because I didn't know till just like a month ago that non-Catholics thought contraception was okay.
Right.
And so when I hear like, you know, Jews or Christians say that, like, you know, oh, you know, why would you have abortion? Just go use contraception. And it's like, well, let's think about what that implies, though. Yeah. If you use contraception, you're still telling people, go do whatever you want without having to face the consequences of your actions. Just simply put, like, even, you know, not looking at doctrine, not looking at official church teaching or anything like that. Just thinking logically in terms of a moral stance, you're still encouraging promiscuity because you're still giving people a way out.
Right.
But then, like JP2 also mentioned, when contraception fails, abortion becomes a lot more readily accessible. And so a lot of people tend to say that contraception reduces abortions. And actually, Renee Favalli, she spoke to Matt Fradd about this on a video called Why Contraception is Anti-Woman. We'll put it down in the link. And she said, what's fascinating is that if you look at the research, and you can even look at the Guttmacher Institute, which is the research arm of Planned Parenthood, so it's a very pro-choice organization, even their research indicates that once a society becomes contraceptive, abortion rates actually go up. They don't go down. Wow. And the reason is because sexual behavior changes. It becomes riskier. It becomes more casual. So unplanned pregnancies go up and abortion rates go up, right? So that was really shocking for me to realize and to see that there's actually a correlation here, because abortion essentially becomes backup contraception.
Wow.
I'm going to say that again. Abortion essentially becomes backup contraception.
Well, because think about it. It's like, okay, well, plan A didn't work, so let's go to plan B. And that's what it goes back to, not taking responsibility. That's why they made contraception in the first place. So all the way back, so the early church fathers, like John Paul II is not the only pope that spoke out against it. Like, I think you have one from Pope Pius. But basically, the Catholic Church has taught against this even from the beginning. Like, our early church fathers taught against this, and it's even in the Didache, which is the teachings of the 12 apostles. It distinctly says, you shall not consume potions. And what he meant by that is that back then, the women would make all these herbs, and they would take those herbs, and because they were like really good with like plants and stuff, and they would make specific herbs that they would take, and it was a form of contraception. It would cause them to miscarry their baby. So, and that carried on until now. And kind of like Jesus said, wasn't there a quote from the Bible where Jesus was talking to the women? Yes, and I have that one right here too. So it was actually, let's see, Luke chapter 23, verse 29.
For behold, the days are coming when they will say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.
Right. So that is also a prophecy to today, where they taught against it back then. Like he said, now it's looked at as okay to have contraception, okay to have abortion, because, oh my gosh, you're a woman who doesn't have a kid, go you, you don't, you can take on whatever you want because you don't have this child holding you back.
Yeah, and that's what he says, and I remember first reading this and being like, wait, what? But it says specifically, the days are coming when they will say. He's not speaking on his own accord. He's saying when they will say. Who's they? The people, society, the world.
And look at us now.
Yeah.
Like people are so immature now that they're willing to have all these relations outside of marriage and then not pay for the consequences of that child. So they're basically, it's not love. They're not loving each other. They're just sexual objects.
Yeah.
And go ahead and talk about what Pope Pius XI said.
Yes.
And then we will also talk about Humanae Vitae, which is an encyclical that Pope Paul VI wrote, which also talks about it. And he foretold a bunch of stuff that is happening today about contraception. Because like we said, contraception has evil roots. And there's a lot of stuff that is rooted to it, and it's produced evil fruits. And some of those fruits, like you said, are abortion, promiscuity, no respect for women, men not taking responsibility. And then it kind of gives this mentality of oh, we can do whatever we want with our bodies. Like, we're God. We don't have to pay the consequences, So go ahead and read that.
So regarding his frank 1930 pronouncement on birth control, Castigo Novi, Pope Pius XI declared that contraception was inherently evil, which you mentioned earlier, and any spouse practicing any act of contraception violates the law of God and nature and was stained by a great and mortal flaw.
Wow. So see, that's even talking about in marriage.
Yeah.
Because marriage couples contracept too. And a lot of people don't know what's wrong. Well, however, there is an alternative to contraception, and that's called natural family planning. So so let me give you these statistics first. So 1 in 2 marriages fail, right? Which is crazy. 1 in 300 who get married in the church fail. Okay. Because that covenant and they have God. Right. Well, 1 in 1,500 fail using natural family planning. So that really, and natural family planning
is when necessary.
Only when necessary. So the church allows natural family planning when you definitely cannot afford another child, or when the woman has health problems and she can't carry a baby. And so what they ask in natural family planning is just as effective as contraception. And what it is, it's where you abstain from having relations on specific days of the month when the woman is fertile.
Right, yeah, depending on her menstrual cycle and all of that. So it's just calculating the days.
Right. So you don't have to use the evil of contraception.
Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, that is only when there is a medical or financial need kind of there.
Otherwise, you have to be open to life. That is part of the covenant of having kids. When you get married, it's such a beautiful covenant and sacrament where you become one, and it's sanctified by the church, you know? So the fact that you would get married and not be open to that life shows that it's just physical love. You're not actually loving the person, wanting to give yourselves whole to them. So there are some specific teachings of the church. Like I said, the church has been against it. The Father spoke against it, and we're going to go into how the Pope spoke against it. You mentioned Pope John Paul II, and then there's Pope Pius. Right. Well, so in the this is from the Beginning Apologetics book written by Father Ciccone and Mr. Burnham. They're apologists. And so it says the use of contraception will lead to a widespread of marital unfaithfulness.
Marital unfaithfulness.
Oh, thank you. Marital unfaithfulness. A general lowering of moral standards and the coercive use of governmental powers to enforce its use. So you're basically giving into the government.
Right.
Moreover, you're letting society tell you what to do, basically. Moreover, men will lose their respect for women and view them as as mere sex objects. Here, Humanae Vitae was prophetic. So this is what he foretold, Pope Paul VI, right? Pope Paul VI.
Yes.
When he wrote that book, he foretold so many things, and one of them, like we said, in fact, I have them written down here. He said that there would be infidelity and a moral decline, loss of respect for women, which we talked about, the abuse of power, and unlimited dominion. You think you have dominion over your own body, you think you have dominion over somebody else's body. And like you said, the abuse of power, people think that they're God, people think that they can control conception and stuff. And when you think about it, isn't it funny how contraception is exactly the opposite of conception? Conception gives, fruits life and is loving, and contraception withholds that.
Oh, even in the terminology itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's so true.
So I'm going to read from here some really interesting points that the Apologist book said, and just a few from the whole thing. They have a lot on why this is wrong and where it comes from. But It says, before discussing what contraception is and what the church teaches about it, let's look briefly at history. The sexual instinct is very strong. Given our fallen nature, it shouldn't surprise us that people would want to get pleasure from the sexual act, but avoid having children and the responsibilities they bring.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not surprising. Ancient Egyptian documents dating from 1900 to 1000 BC give receipts for contraceptives that women could use. The practice of premature withdrawal, onanism, was undoubtedly common in the ancient world. The well-known story of Onan took place roughly 1,500 years before Christ. And Onan was a story from the Bible of this guy who spilt his seed rather than to carry offspring with his brother's wife.
That's what they call pulling out.
Right, and he was struck dead for it. And and that's something we also need to mention, is that there are also male contraceptives. There aren't just some for women.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says... Further, it says, it's clear that contraception was widespread in the ancient world. It's also equally clear that the early church condemned it in the strongest possible language. Like, all the popes, all the early fathers who spoke about contraceptive.
The Didache.
Right, exactly. Apostles, they spoke against it. They said it was wrong. The early church father considered contraceptive practices gravely sinful. The ancient church documented the Didache condemns the use of potions which were used for contraception and abortion, which is what we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
This refutation of all heresies, St. Hippolytus condemns women who take drugs to make themselves sterile. The great church fathers St. Jerome, St. Augustine, and St. John Chrysostom. Thank you.
Chrysostom.
Thank you. All forbade contraception. All church fathers who mention contraception condemn it. Not one approves it. Nor did any Catholic bishop, theologian condone contraception until modern times.
And of course, everything gets screwed up in modern times.
Yeah, really. So obviously, the early church fathers teach against it, and it's like a lot of Catholics these days don't know it's wrong.
Yeah.
And like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
Because a lot of people don't just use it for, not wanting to have children, which is like the main use for it, but like they use it for like acne and.
Or they even use it like girls, like young girls when they have heavy cycles, and so to control their bleeding.
Right.
They prescribe them birth control when there's plenty alternatives out there.
Well, and they don't realize what that's doing to their body. Like even in this society, they give like HPV shots for like it's like this society is so is like accepting that you're gonna go be scandalous instead of teaching you virtue. It's like they automatically know you're gonna do it, so they've come up with all these alter things to keep it from happening. Like, and think about it, you get STDs and like sicknesses from having.
A condom is not gonna stop an STD.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so like there was this one story where my sister went into the doctor and he said, let's give her the HPV shots. And my mom was like, I'm not going to give her that. She doesn't need it. Yeah. And this was a Catholic doctor who had kids of his own. Yeah. And he basically was saying, like, we all like to think that our kids are like priests and nuns, but that's not the truth. Like, we need to be careful. And it's like, it's that same mindset that teaches kids that it's okay to do this stuff. Because it's like saying, oh, you're going to do it. So, like, take this to keep you from getting sick. So they know that you're going to get sick and problems from it.
It's basically enabling sexual, sexual immorality. And my mom had to go through the same conversation too. My mom was like, she's not going to have sex outside of marriage. Like,
yeah. It's like,
why am I going to give her the HPV shot? And I was just like, well, this is awkward.
Well, and like we said, some of the girls out there don't know what it does to their body. Like, just some of the side effects from contraception, besides the fact that it takes a year to leave their bodies.
Oh, right.
And it has like a bunch of chemicals and hormones in their body that make them unbalanced, unbalance their hormones.
Yeah.
It causes cancer, obesity, stroke, blood clots, depression, infertility.
That's a good thing. That's a big one.
Yeah. High blood pressure and breast cancer.
Oh, right. Because some of the, a lot of the birth control like methods or the pills or things like that, they have like carcinogens in them and like heavy levels of estrogen.
Wow.
And yeah.
And and it's been proven how that leads to problems in the human body. In fact, there was a study done on fish.
Yes, there were trans. Sorry. It sounds funny. It sounds very silly, but it sounds very silly, but yes.
And another form of contraception is the procedures that men and women have done on themselves to keep from having kids. That's just as bad as taking contraception, because you're literally closing off that life. You're saying children are a burden. I can't get anywhere with children. I want to have my fun and not have any responsibility for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So go ahead and read. This is just gonna kind of give you an idea of what these drugs and this contraception, what these pills do to the human body.
Right, so this is from National Catholic Register. It's called Birth Control in Drinking Water, a Fertility Catastrophe in the Making. And it basically says, a recent report from the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, found that birth control hormones excreted by women, flushed into waterways and eventually into drinking water, can also impact fish fertility up to 3 generations after exposure, raising questions about their effects on humans who are consuming the drugs without even knowing it in each glass of water they drink. Oh boy.
I was like,
oh no. Let's just put this to the side.
So it not just affects the fish, it affects our water.
Yeah. Oh, yes, exactly. So the survey published in March in the journal Scientific Reports looked at the impact of the synthetic hormone 17A ethinylestradiol. Double E2. Double E2. We'll put it in the links and then I'll correct it in the subtitles. An ingredient of most contraceptive pills in the water of Japanese Medaka fish during the first week of their development. And it goes on to say that these exposed fish and their immediate offspring appeared unaffected. The second generation of fish struggled to fertilize eggs with a 30% reduction in fertilization rate. So that's already affecting procreation. And their embryos were less likely to survive. Even the third generation of fish had 20% impaired fertility and survival rates, though they were never directly exposed to the hormone. Scientists have known for more than... the study adds to a growing body of evidence that man-made endocrine-disrupting chemicals, birth control, those that affect hormone systems and numerous body functions, including conception, are damaging wildlife, wreaking havoc on reproductive, immunological, and nervous systems. Scientists have known for more than 15 years that humans are excreting their prescription drugs into American sewers, and the water purification systems are not equipped to filter the chemical effluents from drugs, including anything from birth control pills and painkillers to psychiatric medicines. But scientists are particularly concerned about the contraceptive chemical double E2 because of its ability to, get this, feminize male fish and its association with plummeting fish fertility. A landmark 2007 study, for example, described a 7-year-old whole lake experiment in northern Ontario, Canada, in which tiny amounts of double E2 induced intersex male minnows whose testicles contained eggs, as well as altered egg production in female fish. This ultimately resulted in the near extinction of the species from the lake, as well as a threat to larger fish populations. Numerous subsequent studies across the globe have linked birth control hormones to impaired fertility, transgender fish, and reduced fish population. Minnesota population researchers looking for the endocrine disruptors found them even in remote lakes thought to be pristine, and when they lowered cages of male lab minnows into the lakes, most of them were feminized within 3 weeks.
Dang. So all the stuff that is in the contraceptives are not only causing infertility, but the transgender tendencies.
Yeah, and it does sound very far-fetched, but if you really think about it, it's, you have this estrogen that's going into our streams and into our waterways. And what it's basically saying is that even a lot of people try to say that these waterways, it's like, oh well, the estrogen in our waters, it's only like 1% from the birth control, or these contraceptive pills, and it's like, yes, but it even said in this article, even a small amount of estrogen is enough to hurt, first of all, the fish population because it's messing with their procreation, and on top of that, it is creating transgender and like gender dysphoria tendencies in fish. So imagine what it's doing to us, and this is the water we drink, like. Dude.
This just shows that everything that is not from God and that is made by men is, like, evil.
Yeah.
Like, think about it. Think about all the things that the men did to try to imitate God, and look at what it's causing to happen to us. And it's, like, really crazy. And another one of this, so we see all the side effects that happen. No matter for what reason you take contraceptives, it's going to be always wrong, because not only is it being immature and not opening to life, but it hurts your body. And it's making everybody objects instead of loving them. And another thing that they noticed in contraception was that couples who contracept are at a much higher divorce rate. So Father Stephen and I were actually talking about this, and Father Stephen is a priest from California who actually introduced the two of us, so good friends, love triangle. Fathers. Good friends. Good friends. So we were actually talking about this one day. We're actually talking about this one day, and we were talking about how there was a high divorce rate in couples who contracepted. Mm-hmm. So we're going over the reasons, and obviously they cut off life, so they treat each other like objects, and they're closed off to each other. So those are some of the reasons why the marriage fails, because they just don't have that full love.
Right.
They're keeping something from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so it turns out that another one of the reasons is that. So actually, how men and women are built differently, right?
Yeah.
Well,
why you built like that?
Yeah, so they're built differently. So one of the things that are different in men and women is that women have a more advanced senses. Like their senses are more advanced.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a higher than normal keen sense of smell compared to men.
Yeah.
So women unconsciously it's just the way we're built. They actually use that sense of smell to be attracted to guys.
Right.
So they smell a cologne on a guy and they are attracted to them, So it turns out that actually when a woman is on contraceptives,
mm-hmm.
their sense of smell, because it unbalances their hormones and everything like that in their senses. So what actually happens is that their sense of smell is enhanced or just changes or something.
Oh, okay.
So what happens is they'll fall in love with the guy and be attracted to him using their sense of smell,
Mm-hmm.
Well, they'll get married to that guy, and after they're married and they stop using contraceptives, they'll all of a sudden be like, whoa, why did I marry this guy? I'm not in love with him. And they end up divorcing. So what it is that they think that they're in love with this guy while they're on contraceptives, and then after they get married and stop using contraception, turns out they're not in love with this guy. It's just that the contraceptives messed them up so much that they thought they were attracted to this guy and they weren't.
Yeah, it had a physiological effect on their olfactory senses.
Right, and that just shows just how harmful this is to the woman's body.
Yeah.
Like we said, it comes from evil roots, but also produces evil fruits.
Right.
Like abortion. Yeah, like abortion, promiscuity, like Pope Paul VI said, promiscuity, the loss of respect for women, euthanasia, he foretold it all. All this comes from the idea of contraception, because the idea of contraception comes from the culture of sexual immorality and the culture of death. Yeah. So they're all connected.
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, when you talk about contraception, how you said it's a culture of sexual immorality, it's easily objectifying both men and women.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you want to talk about women's rights and female empowerment and all that. Boy, you shouldn't be, girl, you shouldn't be using contraception to begin with, and boy, too. Because it's objectifying them as sex objects. The point of sex is for the procreation and for uniting the couple in love.
Just like we have eyes to see, hands to feel.
Right.
Yeah, we have sexual organs and
reproductive organs.
Thank you. Yeah, to have kids.
Yeah, exactly. And so once you mess with the sort of the purpose of the conjugal act of sex, you're just objectifying men and women, because you're not doing it with the end means that biologically, naturally, and even morally it's originally placed.
Well, and think about it, you're also taking away the woman's sense of womanhood.
Exactly.
You're taking away her whole being, which is to have kids and be fruitful and be nurturing. You're taking that before the first commandment. God told us to be fruitful and multiply. Yeah, yes. And we're totally going against that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's incredibly patronizing to women to say that it's okay for her to just sleep around. Sorry to say it like that, but it's true. And like I was telling you, I think last time I said that there's this. I was watching a YouTube video. I don't know what it was about, but there was this comment that I saw where this lady said, girls, don't allow yourself to be booty calls unless you want to be a booty call. That's called female empowerment. And it's like, sis, how is that female empowerment when you're so first again, that's objectifying to the woman. But on top of that, this sort of culture of death that we're embracing, and this free sex culture that we're propagating, it's patronizing women in the sense that it's devaluing, again, like you said, their motherhood. But it's incredibly patronizing, because you're basically telling a woman you are not strong enough to be a mother and to be a valuable member of society.
Oh yeah. The feminists are all about you can't succeed if you have children. It's all about empowering women. Do what you want to do until you are a stay-at-home mom, and then you're lame.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like. This is the complete opposite of female empowerment. Oh yeah, the complete opposite, because you're telling a woman you only have, if you don't have sex for kids, because who cares about motherhood? Yeah, you're only valued if you're all those other expletives that as a Catholic I cannot say. But you guys catch my drift, If you're saying that their value comes in, I want to be a booty call, I want to sleep around, then go ahead and do it. It's like, oh sure, just go, treat yourself like a sex object. Yeah. Treat yourself like a sex toy. If I'm sorry, men aren't doing it enough. Yeah. Don't do it to yourself.
That's another thing, is that you're also teaching men. You're also teaching men not to have responsibility, not to take action.
Not to respect women, and not to be gentlemen. We don't need feminist men. We need gentlemen.
Yeah.
Ooh,
and what do you think it's also telling the children?
Yeah.
Like, you're literally, imagine telling your kids, use this contraception to keep from getting pregnant. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like supporting them, like, we know you're gonna do it. And then it's also telling your kids, like, oh, I had this abortion, or I'm using this contraception because I don't want you to have a sibling, because human life is not important.
Exactly.
So it's just teaching our children from the very beginning. It's indoctrinating them, and that's why it destroys the family.
Yeah, so just to reiterate on, everything we've talked about lately. First episode, we talked about masculinity and the patriarchy, and so men are destroyed when you attack the patriarchy and ideas of masculinity. Then we talked about gender dysphoria and LGBT ideology, and, once you get men out of the household, you get toxic ideologies. Ideologies are just able to enter into the families seamlessly because there's no father figure there to protect them anymore. And that inherently closes the family off to life because, again, how is a man and a woman going to reproduce?
Right.
And so once you're closing the family off to life, one of the easiest ways to do that is contraception. Right. And especially because contraception is one of the things that not everyone understands is evil.
Right.
And again, if you're not Catholic, I get that. You guys have different beliefs, but just think about it morally. Contraception inherently closes off to life, and on the other hand, contraception encourages promiscuity and sexual immorality because you're telling people, go have sex and don't worry about the consequences.
Right. And then when that doesn't turn out, guess what it leads to?
It leads to the greatest evil of all, which is abortion, which we will be covering in the next and final episode of this 4-part series.
Yeah. So you can see these are all connected, and in them all being connected, you can see that all of this stuff happens from taking out the male in the family and that authority. Yeah. Because, the male is really in charge of the moral correctness in their family. Yeah. And think about it, if they had stern fathers to say, you are a beautiful woman, you are, a daughter of Christ, you do not need to be giving your body to all these men. Yep. Children are important, so have children inside of marriage,
It's all interconnected.
And to tell their men, and to tell their son, keep it to yourself. Like, literally, these women are women of God, they deserve. Don't give your boyfriend husband privileges.
That's true.
Only your husband have privileges that boyfriend should not have. Yeah. That's why you need to be modest, Exactly. Because you don't want to give unworthy eyes give yourself to them when they're not even worthy of you. Like, if they cannot spend the rest of their life with you and have children with you, they're not worth your time.
And that's some tea.
So that's about it,
basically. Pretty much. So again, remember, the huge question was, we're talking about how this destroys a family, but what we're constantly thinking about and just pushing again to really think about is why. Right. Why are we trying so hard to destroy the family with these, immoralities and toxic ideologies? Right. And so in the next episode, because it is the final episode, we talk about the greatest evil of them all, which is abortion. Once we talk about abortion, which, by the way, really quickly, we're so happy that Roe v. Wade got overturned.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my gosh, that is just awesome. And there's a lot of backlash. Yeah. But we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that next episode.
But yeah, and this is not just our personal beliefs. Like we say, this is what the Catholic Church teaches. The early fathers taught against it. The Catholic Church still teaches against it today. It's an intrinsic evil. It is wrong. Exactly. And it is gravely sinful, as the Pope said. Gravely sinful. You are you need to stop taking it and go to confession, because it is gravely wrong.
Yeah, it's harmful for your soul and it's harmful for your body too.
Oh yeah, physically and mentally.
Yes, exactly. So again, next week, abortion, and we're also going to finally be answering why this obsession with destroying the family. We're going to tie it all together. We've been mentioning it in every episode, but now we're really going to go in. So make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Unveiling the Truth with Nefer and Nelly. Follow us on Spotify, our iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. We're finally on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and make sure to follow us on Instagram at unveiling_the_truth_ and
and like we always say, do your own research on it, find out for yourself. There's tons of information about this. We're really just skimming the top every time we go into this and trying to make it as condensed as possible, but there's so much that can be said about it.
And check our descriptions, because we put in information and there are more resources than the resources we use for our videos, because we want to be as factual as possible.
Heck yeah. So, because the Catholic Church is, infallible. It always speaks the truth. And so we're just trying to get that out there.
100%.
So, thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed, and we hope to shed some light on this subject for you. But have a great day. God bless you, and keep that fire burning.
Bye.
Bye.